Hey everybody, as promised, a deep dive video into an aspect of Dragon Age Veilguard. And yes, I got my hair cut. This is physical proof that I got it done because I'm already feeling. I usually bring my own shampoo to the hairdresser and I didn't, and I'm already feeling the tingle. But that has nothing to do with this video. We're going to be talking about Taash from Dragon Age Veilguard and what's going on with them. Now, I was originally gonna do pictures and video and all that stuff, and there will be some of that for people who are not interested in playing the game, but it's what the fuck is going on with all this controversy? So there'll be some, so you know what Taash looks like, and little references, but I'm not gonna do too much, because I know that no matter what I do, this video will get hate bombed because some people are not rational about this. So I figured it was a great excuse to try out a new microphone configuration. And I know that the people who hate things are really loud, and the people who like things tend to be more quiet because they just don't want to draw the ire of the people who hate things. And that is just the world, right? And so since there's nothing we can do about that, all we can do is adapt to it. But to those who think they can shut down this conversation with hate, don't bother. It's a waste of your time. Oh, who am I kidding? That's all there really is in this space. But okay, so we're going to do the help support this channel and then move on with it. Here we go. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. If you like this sort of content, a few bucks kicked my way would be appreciated because people are being assholes. So if you like this content, money is better than screaming. Thanks. Okay, so Taash, I want to do a bit of a preamble of my general issues with language, with the gender aspect to Taash. And this was something I said before I played the game, that the whole idea of a non-binary character in the Dragon Age setting struck me as somewhat weird, and not to my liking. Now, notice I said it's not wrong. I said just not to my liking, because there are binary people in Dragon Age, right? I've always had an issue with the term non-binary, and if you check my Instagram, I have she, her, they, them on that. So this affects me. And the whole thing about, okay, if you're non-binary, then everyone else is a binary, and they're not. They're one or the other, right? The term gender fluid or gender non-conforming I like better because it just is more accurate. And this linguistic quibble becomes more of an issue in a fantasy setting, especially in a fantasy setting where some characters are literal binaries. Okay, Lucanus in Dragon Age Veilguard, Anders in Dragon Age 2. They are both binaries. There is Anders, and there is Justice, and there's Lucanus, and there is Spite. Those are binary people. So the vast majority of people in Thedas are non-binary. It would be nice if the trade term for non-binary in the world was something different. But that's where we get into the problem with the trade language in Dragon Age. It's just the language that the player speaks. It's like common in Forgotten Realms, right? So we get into this linguistic problem. And this is something that is a problem with fantasy, not just Dragon Age, right? We have the problem of, well, you can't define every word. We can have things like Vashadan, which is like the Qunari word for crap, or, elfish words. Sorry, Elven, they call it in Dragon Age. This isn't Tolkien. But most of the words have to approximate the language the player speaks. And the accepted term that most people understand a person who is somewhere between the extremes of male or female, those are non-binary in our world. So we have a problem where the world that the player is going to understand is dissonant with the game setting. And that's how do you want to fail? Do you want to spend all your time setting up the word for the artists known as non-binary people? And I mean, this gets into trouble with the character creator. When I played through the first time with Dragon Age, I played as a non-binary person who used she, her pronouns just to see if I could break it, right? And the result, because there's no gender fluid option, it's a very, very rigid non-binary experience. And I was like, this is why I don't ask anybody to change pronouns for me, because this is the shit that people think about. And I hated it. And it made me angry, and it made me feel powerless. And I chose the option to see what would happen. And that's the very important thing. Remember I said in my Veilguard review that watching the game is not the same as playing the game? This is very important on this point, okay? Because watching the game on someone's Twitch stream or in a YouTube video, you have to consume the content that the person playing the game for the purposes of the video selected. So you can't do anything about it. But those non-binary options, I stopped using them except with Taash's specific quest because I couldn't stand them. But I can say the same thing about the comedy mask options in the first playthrough I did. They're terrible in a lot of places. They're clunker funny, right? So I didn't pick them. Maybe other people like them. I didn't, so I chose not to. If you're just watching a playthrough, you don't have that power, and therefore it's going to land very, very differently on you. The non-binary options, I hate the dialogue wheel, but you have to menu out of the first set of responses into a secondary dialogue wheel and then select, and it marks very clearly that this is the non-binary dialogue option that you only get if you've selected to play as a non-binary rook. That's the name of the main character in Dragon Age. So you are not exposed to this particular type of content unless you went there fully willingly. And you do not get this sense when you watch playthroughs. You have to have multiple settings that you yourself chose. And if you don't want that experience, you don't have to have it. If you don't want top surgery scars, you don't have to have it. And there are a lot of things in the analysis of Dragon Age the Veilguard, including by former BioWare employees. That's cheap. Man, you criticize the work of a company that you used to work for, knowing that they're getting a ton of fucking crap as is, and you could probably reach out and give your feedback to somebody directly or just talk amongst your friends. That's not cool. But there are things that are going to land differently for different players. And I know I have not talked about Taash yet, but that's because we have to establish all this background about the game before we get to Taash, because all this stuff is important, right? It's a game. It's not a movie. It's not a TV show. It's not a YouTube video. It's not a TikTok, right? It's a video game. And so there are some things that pop up in the corner, like when you some choices and then you get kind of, as a result of your choice, this comes up. And a former BioWare dev referred to this as a little condescending. And of course, headlines ran that took out the a little and took out the context. It wasn't about the content, it was about the gameplay feature. And these comments are, this is why, I mean, the relatively little bit I've done in game design, I know that there are certain choices you have to make. And you know, some people are going to like them and some people aren't. And there's no pleasing everybody. So some people found those things a little obvious, or they said condescending, whereas other people who are not used to that kind of game find them helpful. And as much as I found they broke immersion a little bit, for me, as an experienced CRPG player, I knew people who played Baldur's Gate 3 and they'd never played a game of that kind before. And there are certain understandable things that you do, you know, like party recruitment and all that stuff, that they were getting a completely different experience because they didn't know the nudge wink, you know, like, oh, this is a person that we could recruit. Don't just take the first, go kill this person because you can recruit them, right? That kind of thing. Man, people missed out on Karlach, their first playthrough for that, and that is a shame because Karlach is bestie. I love Karlach. So all this gets into the world that Taash, as a character, is now in. Taash is a Kossith. Qunari are followers of Qun, okay? Vishoth are people who do not follow Qun. Tal Vishoth are people who used to be in Qun and now actively oppose the Qun. And it drives me crazy that that is still in the codexes of the game, and they still call all Kossith, the gray guys with the horns, Qunari, when there's three distinct things. This drives me crazy because it's like saying all Arabs are Muslim. All Arabs are not Muslim. A lot are Christian. And all Muslims are not Arab. Some of them are Turkish. Some of them are Pakistani. They are not the same thing. And this is very, very important because Taash is someone who, like Tash's mother, Shathan, took Taash from living under the Qun, so broke from the religion and came to Ravani to stop Taash from being put into the Antam, which is the Qunari military. And this is another significant part of gender, okay? Because Taash has a particular ability. Taash can breathe fire. They are what's called an Adari, okay? Adari are always put into the Antam, which means body in Qunlat is the name of the Qunari language. It means cuirass or body, and all Antam, which are the warrior caste of the Qunari, are male. They are all considered male. So Tash's choice, had Taash lived under the Qun, was male or nothing. Taash being, assigned female at birth doesn't matter to this culture. Okay? They have a term in Qunlan, which is a Qunathlok, which means born as one gender but lives like another. This is something borrowed from a lot of indigenous societies in Canada and the US. They have like multi-gender theory. But yeah, so Taash is an Adari, and therefore, which Adar is the word for cannon or fire thrower. So Adaris are human cannons. Therefore, they are Antam, warriors, the body. Therefore, they are male. Therefore, Taash would be a Qunathlok. Okay. And Tash's mother, Shathan, And I am sure they named her close to something that was Shaitan for a reason. This woman is Satan. Whoa. Anybody that's had a difficult relationship with an older female relative, especially a mother, Shaitan speaks, it's like it's like a cattle prod up your ass. You're like, oh my God, this woman is terrifying. Ah! It's so well done as a character. And so the coming out that Taash does of deciding that they are non-binary, a term they picked up by mixing with people outside of the Kyun, which, oh God, you don't do if you're a staunch advisor, of the Kyun. Like, you don't follow anything else. If you follow Kyun, you stay, right? Because the Kyun is pure collectivism, right? And your pure social rule theory of gender, okay? The Arishok, leader of the army, must be male because all Antam are male, right? But Taash would be male because Taash is a Kyunath Lok, problem solved, right? So they assign gender based on the role you're sorted into. The Argina, is the leader of the workers. The Arishok is the leader of the Antam. The Argina is the leader of the workers and is always female. Now, have there ever been an Arishok that was assigned female at birth but therefore treated as male like the Kunari? Has there ever been a leader of the workers that was assigned male at birth but considered female by the Kunari? We don't know. The only contact we've had before Shaitan in a Dragon Age game is the warriors. There's been some other Kunari culture in the books and comic books, but in the games, we've not seen, because they don't leave Kunari culture, right? And so the gender thing with Taash isn't just about gender. It's a critical part of their choice in game. And every single one of the companion characters has a loyalty mission where they can go one way or the other. And let me tell you, some of the choices are much... It has that vibe of Dragon Age Origins where you'll hit moments where, okay, I see both sides. This is actually difficult. Because you know there are going to be consequences, but both have their merits. Not every choice in Veilguard is like that. I'm halfway through my bad decisions run right now to see the other option. And it's pretty tough. So Taash has this choice to make. They've been taken out of their religion, the Kyun, by their mother. But the mother is still forcing all the trappings of the religion that they left because the mother, Shaitan, didn't want her, as she considers her daughter, to have to become a warrior, right? She wanted to protect Taash. And this is strange for Kunari. So Shaitan's hypocrisy is central to understanding Taash's journey, right? Shaitan is cramming the Kyun down Taash's throat. We eat this way. We dress this way. It's all Kyun. But we left so that I could protect you. And Taash is this giant, axe-wielding, super tall, ripped as anything person. And the first time you meet Shaitan turns to you as Rook and goes, protect her. About Taash. Like, does Taash look like Taash needs protecting? Taash is a dragon hunter for the Lord of Fortune, and their friggin' mother is treating them like a bloody child. Now, if you've ever known the kids of certain immigrant families, this feels very real, okay? They leave to give them a better life, but then all the old ways come with them. And this causes a particular sort of anguish for the kid, because they're trapped between two worlds. They don't fit in here, they don't fit in there. Living in Canada, and BioWare, as far as I know, Dragon Age is still more developed in Canada than in the US. So this is something that's very Canadian, this experience, because we don't assimilate the same way Americans do. We have this thing where we brought you here for a better life. Now live like we did back in the old country. And this, not the gender, is central to Taash's choice. Whether you can have conversations with Taash about adopting they, them pronouns, but that's not the choice, the loyalty mission choice that hinges at the center of Taash's experience. And I think this is very, very important to understanding what the developers were doing with Taash. Because again, it's not about being cisgender or part of the trans umbrella. It's about what part of the trans umbrella Taash was going to be. Because there's a conversation with Chthon where Taash goes, I'm non-binary. And Chthon kind of rolls her eyes and very condescendingly goes, that's a Cunith Lock. Like, it wasn't a problem that her kid was not cisgender. That wasn't the issue. It was what they called it that was the fight. And Chthon made shitty comments about never seeming interested in men, which was kind of an interesting comment for Canary to make, but it's okay. It's not a character because Chthon's a hypocrite, right? And to me, this is good fantasy. This is good sci-fi. This is in the tradition of, say, Ursula K. Le Guin, or those Star Trek episodes where aliens are warring, and it's because one side's white and one side's black, and the other side, one side's black and the other side's white, right? Like, it seems like such a stupid fight to us, but to them, it's everything. And I thought that distinction was really significant because the Canary culture is so different from a very individualized Western framing, right? Chthon is someone who was individual enough to decide she was going to take a crack at being a mother, even though she said, I'm a scholar. I had no idea how to do this. Right? She decided she wanted to individuate. And then I guess because it was so traumatic for her, she held her kid too close. And that happens with a lot of immigrant families. It is a thing. And people talk about it openly here. Like, I know about this because I've talked to, in my case, it was people who immigrated from India. And it was so lonely and so frightening that they ended up clinging to the traditions, even though they know that many things are better here. The loneliness, the sense of isolation brings them back to those traditions. That felt very authentic. And I thought it was very, very interesting that they used something weird, like a non-binary gender identity. And the fact that I called it weird is why I declared off the top, check my Instagram for pronouns. Okay. Yeah, it's not normal. It's a weird thing to experience. It's a weird thing to hear other people have very, very strong opinions about. And the thing I really liked about Taash is that kind of sports jock that can speak with incredible authority on their sport. So football or baseball, they know everything about it, right? In Taash's case, their sport is dragons, okay? And utterly stupid about everything else. Blockheaded, like real simple. They get into this whole very elfy, elf, big feelings thing in game. And if you notice, I'm trying to avoid spoilers for everything but Taash's plot. But it's this big thing about elf feelings, manifestations of feelings, embodiment of feelings between these two characters who happen to be male and female. And Taash goes, so they're doing it? I mean, Taash is not smart. Taash is not a heavy thinker. And that's why the whole identity thing is so confusing for them. And that's why they need help. That's why Rook makes some suggestions. And this is very dicey. This I actually felt uncomfortable doing as a player because it is very forced to decide for someone else whether they are going to choose modernity or tradition. And that is essentially the choice that Taash makes. Not, am I going to be non-binary? No, it's not a coming out story. It's not Dorian in Dragon Age Inquisition. Holy fuck, that was way more heavy-handed than Taash's Veilguard story. Dorian, at the time, I was like, this is a bit much. But other people felt like it was it spoke to them, right? And that's fine. I don't have to love Dorian's story if other people do. Unfortunately, in Veilguard, it turns out that Dorian going back and facing his responsibilities like his father wanted him to actually helps save the world. So, wow, Big Bad Daddy was right. I don't know if that's an outgoing shot at David Gator by the new writing team. He said some shitty things about Veilguard too. So, there's tension between current BioWare and ex-BioWare. And I wish they would talk to each other instead of through social media. My God. Anyway, so Taash's struggle with identity isn't just the non-binary thing. It's everything culturally. It's how they eat. It's how they dress. It's what they call themselves. And again, this was not somebody who was ever going to be cisgender, right? The mom went, okay, she. But if they stay in the Kyun, they're male, right? And I guess maybe Chthon may have wanted to keep her little girl because that's like her. I don't know. But it was never in the cards for Taash to be female. What was right for Taash was non-binary or, Kunari term for, well, not quite, a Kyun Athlok. It's interesting because a Kyun means balance. And Athlok sounds a lot like Arashok, right? So it's who was born in one gender and lives another. Those were the two options. It was never going to be girl. But there's more to it than that. The non-binary part was just the most confusing thing for Taash because Taash doesn't abstract well. Taash can tell you everything you ever wanted to know about dragon poop. But this idea of, I feel something, this is beyond them. And this is the thing I think is legitimately brilliant. Because everybody was going, the game is so woke. The game is so woke. It shoves it down your throat. And if you read Taash's codex entries, oh God, reading, right? The other non-binary people, and there are villainous non-binary people in the game. There are heroic trans people in the game. And most of it, it's funny, the one that's most in your face because of the they them pronouns, and a guy and somebody with a beard and an eyeliner. I almost said guy, and people would have checked me on that. I use guy as a gender neutral term. But like, he's slimy and villainous, and they put multiple trans people in the game, I think, to show that there's not one way to be trans, and that all trans people are not automatically good people, right? And you're not automatically heroic just because you make that decision. And so the problem is Manratha Society, or that's the head of Tevinter Imperium, the capital of the Tevinter Imperium, or Antivan Society, Treviso's the capital there. They are much more metaphor and symbolism and fashion and what do I want? What does my soul say? And Taash is, completely lost. And I thought this was great because it really did show how confusing this is and how very well-meaning people confuse people and push too hard. They're so excited to bring you into it that they make you go, if that's what this is, that's not me. I don't see myself in that. You know, I'm not gonna, shave the sides of my head and pierce my eyebrow and start wearing like sleeveless t-shirts just because I'm facing the reality that a lot of my instincts and responses to things are what's considered more masculine than feminine. And I have caught shit for that my entire life, to the point that people actually assume shit about me that is clearly tied to my assigned gender. I can do something that, when a couple of guys are talking to each other and somebody will say something and you'll friendly say, come on, bullshit, right? It's a friend checking a friend. That's what you do. Oh God, if I do that, and this is doing it to men, right? Oh no, that's deliberate cruelty. And I'm like, no, this is what friends do to fucking friends. Yes, it was. Like, oh, fuck off. And I get why people want some sort of signifier to go, don't assume that about me, right? And I do think that Taash is a very deliberately constructed character, in that because they are Kunari, Kossith, certain things are going to be assumed about them. And it's wonderful how Taash kind of peels back like an onion, and doing it through, because Taash doesn't say many words. There's no commas in Tasha's dialogue. So it's just, yep, okay. Tasha's original descriptor in the character page is just here, right? Tasha's a person of few words. So the only way you can sort of get something out of them is by observing them with their mother. And one part, they cook dinner. And instead of it being a bunch of vegetables, it's a Ravani meal of meat and cheese. And Shathan gives them shit about it, right? And that happens before they say they're non-binary. It's a question of dress. It's a question of a bunch of things. And then, I think all the characters are default by pansexual in game. And you can't, and they actually are pansexual because you can play as a non-binary rook. Unlike in Inquisition, where Iron Bull was pansexual, but you don't see any indication of that. And so, and there are some characters that feel more straight than others. And we've had some really interesting conversations about that on the Discord server, but that isn't connected to Taash. Taash does seem as a rule to prefer women. And that's cool. And there's some very cute stories connected to that. And so, having played the game and seeing the way people are reacting online, I have two hypotheses. One, they got hung up on a word, non-binary, and just couldn't see past it. But also, they watched the game, not played the game. Because my second playthrough, I'm playing through as a cisgender male Kunari. There's a bit of a part where I'm like, oh, I'm going to play straight up Kyun, because there was a whole, I used the Grey Warden origin, and there was a whole thing in the first game where there actually was a Kunari Grey Warden, and I'm like, this is cool. I'm going to follow this. I'm going to see where it is. But there's one part where my character went rogue, and Taash is like, do you follow the No. Do you? No. My character said no. It wasn't an option for me. And I'm like, fuck, that's dissonant. That's not how I wanted to play. Right? But it's not perfect. And that's the thing. This is one of the first attempts to have a meaningful non-binary character in a AAA video game that isn't what I call just stand there and be trans, the way Creme was. Taash is actually a party member that is a romanceable option and has their own story. They're not just a supporting character. I'm going to stand here and be trans, and we're going to get mega points for it, and we'll take no risks. And it is difficult because everybody's experience is very different, and there are so few of these characters that there's an intense pressure. Just like every male character can't represent all men, and every female character can't represent all women. One non-binary character can't represent all non-binary people. The non-binary trans spectrum is just too diverse, right? There's just, and when you think about it, like there isn't one form of masculinity, right? That's the thing, right? There are 3 men in the party, all very different, all have adorable magical sidekicks too. I noticed that. And then there are 3 women in the party, and they're all very different. And then there's Taash. And so, you know, cisgender men have 3 representatives. Cisgender women have 3 representatives. And then there's, you know, Taash, who has to do all of the everything in one character. And it seems like the people who, for the most part, who would want to be represented by Taash, feel represented. So that character did its job. If you don't need to be represented by non-binary people, just chill and treat it like the no-nose elephants in Mass Effect, you know, the Elcor, the elves, the dragonkin in Forgotten Realms. Like, this is a fantasy realm. And you're worried about somebody not being either male or female. I pointed out in my review video that the Asari are actually neither male nor female. And they tend to refer to she around other races for pronouns because it makes the other races more comfortable. But there are Asari, Kunari. Oh, never put that together before. Interesting. But there are Asari who do use he and do. There's a bartender in, I think it's Mass Effect 3, whose dad was a Krogan, and definitely picked up the Krogan mannerisms, but the male Krogan mannerisms, right? Because otherwise, that Asari would be in a veil, right? So, not the veil from Veilguard, the veil that the female Krogan have. Anyway, God, so many names. I probably messed that up a few times. But getting back to Taash, there's 2 scenes, and I know this is going on a bit, but this is important. Because there's 2 scenes that seem to have been misrepresented that cause people to flip their shit online. And one is the scene that the gift comes from of Taash going like that, right? It's the scene where there's an antagonist called the Dragon King, who's the head of a splinter group of Antam. And they kidnap Shathan, and Taash tries to save their mother unsuccessfully. And is it a bit cheesy? Yeah, but the whole game is very earnest and kind of cheesy in places. You got to embrace the cheese for Dragon Age. It's when it's at its best. But there's this big moment where Shathan refers to Taash as they, finally, right before the Dragon King kills her. And people have misconstrued that scene. But there's another that people had to explain to me. Well, because someone said there wasn't somebody who was given physical punishment for misgendering Taash. And I'm like, no. What? There's a scene late in the game. I happen to get screen grabs from, so you can see them. But it's a whole scene with Isabella. And they talk about pulling a barf. And to me, this scene was an indication of how Isabella has evolved as a character. It was a big Isabella monologue, and I was there for it. So I totally missed that Isabella accidentally misgendered Taash, and Isabella took it upon herself to do push-ups. Now, thing about the Ravani, where the Lords of Fortune are a member of, they like showing off their muscular arms. And Isabella, for being more than 10 years older than she was in DA2, she looks good. I wish I looked that good, because at this point, she's probably getting up around my age, and I don't look that good. So let's face it, the push-ups are not punishment. This was an excuse to do push-ups. But they call it pulling a barf. And it had nothing to do with misgendering. It had everything to do with how to properly apologize. Okay? And they, Isabella talks about lousy apologies, right? And that saying, I'm sorry, doesn't really mean anything unless there's action behind it. And here's a screen grab right here, okay? Some people say, oops, sorry, and hope that fixes it, but they just want to get the whole thing over with. Trust me, I know. That's a callback to, she stole the Kunari's, holy book and just wanted to go, whoopsie, my bad. So this is a character evolution for Isabella, right? And then she says, some people mess up and get all dramatic. They make it about them. Oh, I didn't mean it, right? I'd never do that on purpose. They feel so bad about it that it's on everyone else to smooth it over and make them feel better. Pulling a barf puts it on the person who screwed up. They made the mess. They fix it. Done. It is a physical indication. It is putting effort in so that you don't make it about you and you don't just go, sorry. It's meaningful. That's what that scene's about. It has nothing to do with misgendering being this horrible thing. Quite the opposite. It was something small. The point in that scene is apologies don't tend to mean much until there's action behind them. Now, in our world, where you're not looking for excuses to do push-ups, that's the best way to say you're sorry for misgendering someone is to try not to do it again, And this is, I think, a disconnect between people who actually know non-binary people who use they them pronouns and the internet. Because, yeah, there was a period of time where if you accidentally misgendered someone, they'd try to get you canceled. And if that's the only experience you have with a non-binary person, it's easy to stereotype. And I've had people just not believe me when I was saying, look, those people are not, you know, that's some attention seeking right there. Most people don't want to make a big deal about it. They just want the effort. But if you've had somebody freak out on you online like that, nobody believes me, even though I know it's true. Like, even though I know the people that do use they, them pronouns and are big about it, a lot of them are like, it's okay. They appreciate people try, but they don't push it on anybody. But even the ones that do correct, everybody just goes, shit, right. And what I'll do is if I mess up, I'll go, they. So I'm trying to, because it does take a retraining of the brain to make that a variable, right? So, and I say this as somebody who doesn't insist on a pronoun change. So, there's a lot going on, and I'm sure that people have already left a bunch of nasty gram comments on this video, or they just saw a subreddit about it and they didn't even watch the videos, like dislike, log into another account, dislike. That's engagement, folks. You're helping me. But I do think for the other people, the people said that's a good point about the Asari, right? And these are people who are not super like down with this stuff. I hate the term woke because woke is a term that came from African American vernacular English to describe Black consciousness education back in the day. The white liberals stole it from Black consciousness. And then the conservatives stole it to turn it into a pejorative. But stay woke was originally stay aware of the class struggle, right? Stay aware of racial inequalities. I don't feel right applying that to anything else. But this is, again, a thing about words. And that's the thing. In a fantasy setting like Dragon Age, gender does not mean what it does to us. You're talking about a setting where spirits from the Fade cross over to our world and assume bodies. Gender goes out the window with that, right? Genetics doesn't even work the same way it does with us. If an elf has a kid with a human, they're human. We had a whole discussion about how elves in Arlathan can be so much more diverse from elves in Ferelden, and we actually came up with a theory that the Arlathan elves are the original elf society when the spirits from the Fade came in and took bodies. That's where the elves came from. The Ferelden elves were a smaller subsection of that was much more racially diverse. I'll go with that. Doesn't explain the accents being all over the place, but you know what? I don't care. At the end of the day, these games have to serve so many different people. What works for me is going to feel incredibly clunky to someone else. What feels like too much hand-holding for me is going to be necessary for people who have never played a game like this before. Now, maybe it would have been nice had they turned off the indicators on higher difficulties. Maybe. The game balance on the higher difficulties is so good. I won't belabor. It's so good. I'm so enjoying playing it on the harder settings. It's the first Dragon Age game where the combat actively feels good instead of something you just get through to get to the story, right? But I like this new crop. I know that there were some experienced writers who were still around who got fired after the writing on Veilguard was completed. But what they did with Taash wasn't just about gender. It's very much the story of an immigrant who came to a new place as a baby or as a child and is caught between two worlds and has to figure out what they're going to keep and what they're going to leave behind, even though it was, the traditions were very, very important to their mother. And that's something that if you do practice any sort of minority tradition, I mean, I know I have to do it with Judaism. There's just certain things. It's like, I'm not fucking doing that. I'm not. Because it's not in the book. And they don't even do, depending on what part of the world, like potatoes didn't exist in Europe and Israel when the festival of Hanukkah was set. Potatoes come from Peru. So things shift. And we all have to take our traditions and take the traditional stuff that still works for us. Because obviously I still do this shit, even though I get constantly told I'm not really Jewish. And you take this and you take the traditions that mean something to you and you discard the stuff that doesn't, because tradition without meaning is pointless, right? That's keeping you stuck. If the tradition still has meaning, then keep it. And that's why I think that the key choice with Taash having nothing to do with gender, there's a very clear division between, the Kunari concept of a transgender person, a Cunathlock, which is, it's still a binary, right? Well, you're not a woman, you're a man, right? You live like a man, even though you were born as a woman. But for all intents and purposes, they're men. Because Antam have to be men. There's that, all or nothing, or there's more of a blend, which is what the non-binary thing symbolizes, right? Because you look at them, Tasha's Kossith. Never going to be able to outrun it. Look right at Gray, Horns, done. Kunari. Constantly misidentifying even the belief system, right? The game does it. And so that's accidentally poignant, because if you pick Be More Ravani, it's never going to be human elf dwarf, right? There's always going to be that physical indicator of where they came from. But that isn't all they are. And I think that ties really nicely into the whole, not this, not that, not picking. More Ravani, definitely. And Ravane is a very blended culture because, they got invaded a lot. But you can keep certain things. You have to keep certain things. We can't change our skin color. Well, unless you're, what's her name? Marisol Dosalai. But we can adopt traditions that feel right to us. And it's almost a dig at the whole no cultural appropriation thing, though. Cultural appropriation, misappropriation is what we should be really looking at. So it's deeper than all the people freaking out would lead you to believe. And this is really good world building. This is really good fantasy writing. And I'm glad that the Veilguard team didn't feel discouraged from all the screaming. They sort of saw it coming. And it's like, all right, I do think that the ex-devs that criticized in public, I think that was shitty, because they know better than anybody. People are going to scream. Adding to the pile on it's not cool, because you know what it feels like. right? And you do have, maybe they just burned so many bridges they got nobody to talk to there. But I thought there was a more gracious way than they went about it. And just because somebody writes good stuff doesn't mean they're great people, right? Or it could have been a weak moment. But I hope the Veilguard team feels good about what they did here. Because, nothing's perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect. You have to pick very subjective, all or nothing things like a video game when you're making design choices and not everybody's going to love it. I completely get why they went with the dialogue wheel. Normies love the dialogue wheel. I fucking hate the dialogue wheel, right? But they correctly assessed that I would keep playing the game even though I fucking hate the dialogue wheel. And normies won't play the game because they don't want to read. Right? But I understand that they had to pick who they were going to piss off. And it happened to be me. So if I can handle the dialogue wheel, the rest of y'all can handle the word non-binary. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK.